So, you play Warhammer 40k or Kill Team, and you want to create your own custom lore for one reason or another. Or maybe you're just debating if it's even a good idea in the first place. Well, as somebody who has made the majority of his armies under homebrewed fluff, I can tell you it's definitely worth it. So I'm going to share with you why I think it's worth it for you to do it, and give you some easy tips and tricks to help get those creative juices flowing. Before we dive in though, if you're enjoying the content or you feel that you know somebody who would enjoy it, please share and then press that subscribe button with some authority and help this channel and community grow. So why should you be creating your own homebrew fluff and lore for your different characters and chapters? Well, the first reason is, one, I think it helps you really personalize your army. You get a lot more invested into it and it becomes really connected to you. If you're somebody who does not enjoy the modeling side or the painting side to the hobby, that's totally fine. There's some people out there that don't. But whenever you craft a narrative, like a story that you want to tell with your army, it does actually help you when you sit down to paint to say, oh yeah, I really want to get these models painted up because it's going to work great in my army. So if you're somebody who's starting off fresh, or if you're somebody who's just looking to add on to your army, give a lore reason, give a reason why you might want to be bringing these models or painting these models up in a specific way that kind of fits the narrative that you have. Which kind of brings me to my second point there and a little bit of story. You might run into an overzealous fan who really loves the series and wants to try and keep it as accurate as possible. Now, the thing is there's an in-game reason that, hey, not everybody is a reliable narrator. So some people might embellish certain details or leave things out or omit, facts, misrepresent some ideas within the lore. So it gives you the ability to kind of make mistakes here and there. But some people will hold you accountable to say, oh, well, that color scheme isn't right. Or in my example, when I was first starting my Astra Militarum force, I was primarily making it a PDF force, and I had a Wyvern because I thought, Wyverns looked cool, Basilisks looked cool. I like the artillery side of the game. So I made a small little 500-point list that had some infantry and then had a Wyvern in it. And I got told very quickly by this guy that had been playing a much longer time than I had that, well, this wouldn't be lore accurate. A PDF wouldn't have that kind of artillery piece. They'd be a whole lot more focused. They might have a Lehman Russ, if even that. And I kind of felt bad for it. I was like, oh shoot, I screwed up. But in reality, I ended up just going through and I made my own homebrew reason. I said that these guys had their own STC, their own standard template construct of the Wyvern patterned Basilisk, which I converted my Wyvern over into, and said that, because of this is what their world was known for adapting and manufacturing some of these different, vehicles and some of the different equipment that they had as well too. And so that's why they had it. And then once I did that, it actually, a lot more people kind of stood back and said, oh, well, that's actually really cool. And they started asking me more questions about the world and the lore and the background. And I thought, oh, this is awesome. It opened up an opportunity for me to kind of share my creativity with other people, which was cool. And I mean, I know there's a lot of other reasons out there to do it, but those are just some for me, like why you might want to do it. If you guys decided to start creating your own custom chapters or regiments or high fleets or whatever, please let me know down in the comment section down below, because I'd love to hear from you and also have the rest of the people in the community know that there are others out there too that join for different reasons into this side of the hobby. Now, half the battle of why is out of the way. How do you go about doing it? Well, I am going to steal a little bit of my content from my past podcast. Back when I was playing Dungeons & Dragons, I had a method for creating a little bit better than just a two-dimensional character, making three-dimensional characters pretty easily for your armies. And so you want to start with your character. I recommend start with your leader or your warlord for your different forces if you're playing Kill Team versus 40k. And you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. The first question is where were they born? Or where were they raised? That's going to be able to answer a lot of questions. And you can say, oh, well, they're born on Daneth 5. And Daneth 5 was known to be a death world. And so people that were there had to be hardy and resilient, had to be super strong, blah, blah, blah. You figure it out there. Well, now you created your character, like where they're from, but now you've created a location that you can kind of plug into your world. So you can have battles on that world now, or you can just simply kind of reference that in some different like narrative aspects of the game, which is kind of cool. The second thing you want to do is, how did your character get into the position they're at now? So in D&D, it's how did they get into the class they're at. This one, it's what model do they represent? You know, how did this person become a sergeant of his squad? Or maybe this Space Marine character I was talking about, maybe he is a Primaris Psyker. And so you can say, well, whenever he was a neophyte, they actually found when he was young that he actually had latent psychic abilities. And so at a younger age, they tried to start indoctrinating him and kind of getting to know him a little bit and starting testing his powers of the warp. And they really started to train him and indoctrinate him into the Space Marine chapter itself. And he showed superior skills over other people. Even so that he even crossed the Primaris Rubicon, and now he is a Primaris librarian leading this force. Which then gives me a third question here is, what is motivating your leader to lead in the specific manner they are, or going on to these different missions? Well, you know, it's a little bit different across the games, but you can kind of say something like, well, maybe he has a distaste for a specific faction and that's why he's constantly fighting. Or maybe he is a goody two-shoes that says, I just want to go out and try to help the Imperium the best I can and try to safeguard humanity. Or maybe it's something along the lines where he's like, listen, I'm looking for hidden archaeotech to make myself more powerful. And so that might open up an opportunity for you to do some narrative play, or maybe even just say, oh, well, he's going to be equipped with certain chapter relics to show that he is trying to accumulate these different weapons and technology to help make himself more powerful. Then you'll kind of want to jump over and say, okay, well, now we got a character down. Now you can start working on the faction itself. So if you're creating a homebrew faction, look at a overall faction. Think Imperial, think Chaos, think Xenos, start there. Then find one of the different factions from there. So Space Marines, or maybe Orcs, or maybe your Chaos Force, and maybe like a cult that's worshiping a specific god. Great, you've kind of figured that out there. And then you're going to ask kind of similar questions. You're going to ask, okay, well, what is the home world for this specific force? Or is there one, and why? So maybe you are a fleet-based chapter because you haven't found a homeworld yet. Or maybe you're the Astromilitarum force that I was talking about earlier that lost their homeworld due to the Orc invasion. And now they're just traveling around the whole universe, just trying to help out the Imperium where they can, just as a spare regiment to help bolster some of the forces on the war effort. Great. You've got that idea out of the way. Now you've got the homeworld and you've kind of got a reason for it. And now you know, hey, Orcs are tied into this. Now it's time for you to start tying some of the game rules into your faction itself, and maybe start thinking about, okay, well, what is my faction good at? What are they known for? And so maybe if you're playing a Space Marine faction that's more hardy or resilient, well, great. Now you can kind of tie that in the world, saying, well, this death world had a bunch of different toxic fumes that actually strengthened the people, and they had hardier resilience because they had to grow up in an atmosphere that was pretty much trying to kill them from the day they started. Kind of like the Catachans with their giant death world of the fungal jungles and stuff, and trying to kill them on that side. Like, they're stronger, more hardy, resilient soldiers. Or maybe you can say something like, my successor chapter, they're like White Scars. Or maybe some of the traits is that they had to be nimble and quick because on their planet, on the death world, there are creatures and beasts that if you're not fast enough and nimble enough and quick enough to outwit your opponent, you will be dead. And so maybe that's why the chapter draws from that place in the first place. So you can think about the strength and kind of tie it into it. Use the rules that you're planning on using, use some of the different models that you have, and that's a way to kind of tie in the strengths. Now we flip the coin over and we start talking about the flaws. Now, flawed characters and chapters, they are the best characters and chapters. Simply for the fact that we're not perfect people. As humans, we are flawed, we mess up, we have mistakes. So when you have challenges to overcome, it makes you a lot more invested into that character, chapter, or faction, or whatever it happens to might be. You will be able to relate to it a little bit there and be more gumptious and saying, hey, I want to play this. So maybe you are over specialized or hyper specialized into one specific avenue, and so it leaves a weakness for you. Or maybe it's a certain leadership style. Maybe your character is the reason your chapter has a flaw. Maybe you've lost a lot of battles. Maybe you are barely surviving. Or maybe you've done something that was very horrendous that now, like, other people within your same faction are coming after you. So like, it could give you a reason to say, well, I have my Imperium faction, but I have another Imperium force trying to kill me. So I use this with my my Valoris 5th back when I was playing them, or now the Cadian 820th. they essentially, their commissar executed a traitorous planetary governor. Well, the planetary governor was actually related to an inquisitor, and because of this, they are now kind of on the run from every force, including the Imperium, but still trying to serve the God Emperor and humanity as best as they can, while also still running into conflict of occasionally fighting other Imperial forces. So that kind of gives you an idea of, say, oh well, here's the flaw, here's the challenge or the quirk of the army, and that makes it a lot more interesting than just like, oh, they're really big and fast and so they're going to do good. No, you now have this interesting thing that kind of ties the lore into why you might be fighting some of the foes. And that brings me to the last question to think about too, is who are your greatest foes? What are some of your greatest battles? And you can kind of have this. I would recommend thinking about what armies does your army usually go up against. Do you play the kitchen table like once a week or once a month with a buddy that has one army? Great, there's your greatest foe right there. Talk about some of the battles you had, and you kind of make up some lore behind it as well too. You know, on Esfont 8, you know, the moon planet, you went through and you just took, or the moon planet, the moon of Esfont 8, you went through and you were fighting the heretic forces of Nurgle, and they were contaminating the moon, which was then leading to the planet, and so you were charged with taking them down. And so you won some battles, you lost some battles, but now you can kind of recreate that. And if you haven't faced anybody at all, you can say, I'm a brand new faction. I'm a Bambi out here in the woods trying my best to change the Imperium, or maybe I'm a new Necron force that is awakened from my tomb world. Nobody knows about me, and I am spreading chaos and trying to destroy everybody. But these are not hard and fast rules that you need to go by. These are not hard and fast questions you have to use, but hopefully it helps get those creative juices flowing for you, so that way you can jump in and say, okay, I've got an idea of what I'm creating, and this is why. Because if you get those things knocked out, it makes the universe a much more interesting place. And as you read more novels, as you start looking into other YouTube videos or seeing other chapters and stuff, you can kind of start figuring out, okay, well, maybe my chapter would be friends with these guys, or maybe they would be mortal enemies or something. It's a really cool thing in there. It just adds another dynamic to the game and makes it a lot more fun and interesting for you. So I hope this helped you guys out. If it did, feel free to let me know. And again, please like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube things. And until the next time, you guys have fun writing up your lore, creating your characters, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.